Hi everyone, it's Kristan Hawkins and welcome to this new episode of the Explicitly Pro-Life podcast. As you can see, I am not in my home office, and in fact today I'm in Jackson, Wyoming, and you see my lovely camper behind me and maybe a little bit of trees, maybe some wildlife, maybe some birds. We've had some crazy birds. But today I wanted to come to you from the campground, from my vacation, to talk to you about Planned Parenthood and racism. Now, I want to start just very simply at the beginning, just acknowledging what's happened in Minneapolis. As many of you all know, I lived in Minnesota for a number of years, and so it's just been terrifying to see what's been going on, the riots, the looting, the more than 60 some businesses that have been destroyed. But I think we need to acknowledge, and everyone in the pro-life movement, we should be unafraid to acknowledge what went down in Minneapolis with the death of George Floyd and how terrible that is, and how that is a tragedy. And I think we just, at the very beginning, we should be unafraid to say, you know, George Floyd's life mattered. We as pro-lifers know that his life mattered because that's what we do every day, right? Is we advocate for the dignity and the value and the protection of every human person, no matter their age, their race, their level of abilities, their circumstance of conception. And so I think we need to acknowledge the horrificness of what happened in Minneapolis, and the injustice of his death. But what I really want to talk about is how the abortion industry, primarily Planned Parenthood, has been responding to this crisis, and how they're using this crisis to take advantage of this crisis to push their own agenda, which, as you all know, I did an episode not long ago about how Planned Parenthood was using the COVID-19 crisis and the quarantine to push their agenda, and they still continue to do that. By the way, a little update: the ACLU has filed an official lawsuit to push for the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, to get rid of all of their REMS, their basic safety standards, and how RU486 and other chemical abortions should be prescribed to women. The abortion industry, led by Planned Parenthood, wants them to be prescribed via webcam abortions, so women don't have to go to the doctor, so they can just go to the emergency room when they begin hemorrhaging to death. We know Planned Parenthood is no stranger to this tactic. They've done it time and time again, and they're doing it right now, and it makes me so angry. Of course, there needs to be an open dialogue about racism and equality in the United States of America. Absolutely. When we see racism, when we see injustice of any kind, we should be willing to stand up and speak out and work towards a peaceful solution. But when you hear Planned Parenthood kind of leading the charge, cementing a formal relationship with leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement, it's very, very frustrating as a pro-lifer, because we see what happens inside of abortion facilities every day. We witness that pain when women go and walk into that abortion facility feeling as if that is their only solution, that paying someone to dismember their child is their only solution, is their only way out. And they're being fed a pack of lies by Planned Parenthood, by the abortion industry, which tells her, you're right. You're not strong enough. They confirm her worst fears and say, you're not strong enough to do this. And they use that pain to push for violence and for their extremist agenda. And so it's very frustrating to see, for me, I think at least, when we were looking at the tweets and the Instagram posts and the Facebook posts, and in the wake of this horrific tragedy of George Floyd's death, to see these peaceful protests that get co-opted by Antifa, others who basically are just anarchists and want to burn the entire country down. You saw that happen, and then you also saw the abortion industry rush to the defense as well, and acting as if they are a natural ally to Black Lives Matter, when in fact they should be considered the enemy to Black Lives Matter and their entire movement. During this entire national strife, Planned Parenthood has decided to make this crisis about race, about injustice, about policing policing tactics, which is a good conversation, an important conversation for us to have. They've decided to make it about themselves and their interests and to use it to cement this partnership they want so desperately with the Black community. Why? Why would they want to have a good partnership with Black Lives Matter and their leaders? Why would they want to have a good relationship with the Black community? Because it means more money for them. It's very simple. It always comes down to money. I know Mark Crutcher's done research showing that the majority of Planned Parenthood facilities are in urban areas. I think it's over 68%. I know we've done research at Students for Life using the same sort of zip code data and found 79% of Planned Parenthoods are 5 miles from a college campus. But we know from even the CDC, the Center for Disease Control's own numbers, with the last kind of good kind of collected abortion data, which by the way, we need a national abortion reporting law because we don't always have great abortion data because states don't have to report abortion data to the CDC. It's totally voluntary. So states like New York and California, the two largest abortion states in our union, refuse to report that data. But the data that the CDC has from the vast majority of states showing non-Hispanic Black women, it shows that non-Hispanic Black women account for 38% in 2016 of all abortions in the country. That's the largest percentage of any race, ethnic group. African American Black women. So of course, the abortion industry is going to use right now this crisis as a way to make sure they're lockstep, arm in arm with Black Lives Matter, because they know the more relationship they build, the more women, Black women and Black men who will walk into their doors. And that's how they start their predatory business cycle. I mean, I'm going to just read off for you, by the way, some of the tweets that Planned Parenthood has sent out this week. Let's see, the first one. It's time to stand in solidarity with those demanding justice and accountability for the violence committed against Black lives. Absolutely, I agree with you. We can't stop fighting until the systems of radicalized oppression and dehumanization are transformed. What do you think abortion is? Abortion literally is a system of oppression. Abortion literally dehumanizes a whole group of people who we know, because of science, because of biology, have a human DNA, a human genetic code, literally dehumanizes them and says, yeah, but they're not people who matter. That's what abortion does. Another tweet from Planned Parenthood. We're devastated, grieving, and outraged by violence against Black lives. Absolutely, I agree with you. I think every single American with a conscience is. We must continue to demand accountability and justice, and an end to the inequity that continues to define every moment of life for Black America from the racist institutions that uphold white supremacy. Now, I think it's totally fine, and I think it's important for us to say Black Lives Matter. I think it's important for us to say Brown Lives Matter. I think it's important for us to say Blue Lives Matter. It's important for us to come out and just say that, but I don't hold to what Planned Parenthood's kind of, I don't buy what they're selling here of this racist institutions. That bothers me, of this fundamental belief that somehow our entire country is racist. Our entire country is bad and evil. That's wrong. And if you want to talk about institution of white supremacy, Planned Parenthood, you need to think about your entire founding. Your president, your founder and president, Margaret Sanger, your second president, Mr. Alan Guttmacher, who was the president of the American Eugenics Society. If you don't know this racist history, watch Maafa 21, MAAFA 21. It'll give you the entire background from the development of eugenics that stemmed from Charles Darwin's kind of evolution of the species, how this concept of eugenics was kind of created, and how it was, institutionalized with the invention of the American Birth Control League by Margaret Sanger, which then became Planned Parenthood. All right, another tweet. If Black people don't have the right to bodily autonomy, I'm not going to get through this one without getting angry. If Black people don't have the right to bodily autonomy to live their daily lives or protest the violence against their lives without the fear of violence or murder, we can never achieve justice, let alone reproductive freedom. Freedom from violence is reproductive justice. Please explain how abortions are committed every day. Please explain to me how every single abortion is not an act of violence. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. They should be ashamed of themselves. If I were Planned Parenthood, I would run and hide when this issue of racism came up in America. Now, this one was interesting. Another tweet Planned Parenthood put out, they said, our commitments to you are, 1, reckon publicly with our own racist history. Yes, finally. Oh, wow. Pro-lifers haven't been lying for the past 40 some years when we talk about this on campus and people think we're crazy conspiracy theorists. Oh, wow. Planned Parenthood's actually going to say this. Now, what they're going to do is what they did a couple years ago with their 100-year anniversary, where they had Leah Dunham from that terrible HBO show, which I tried to watch like several times. I never could get into it. It was terrible. They kind of whitewashed it, right? They said, oh, well, Margaret Sanger was kind of like racist and a eugenicist, but everybody of that time was. So we'll see how they publicly reckon with their own racist history. But this line kind of shows that our talking points, our narrative, the fact that we've refused to shut up about Planned Parenthood's racist history is actually working. So that's the first part of the tweet. Their second part of this tweet was, improve the delivery of our health care by addressing and correcting implicit bias. 3, step back to create space for Black organizations and leaders organizing this movement. Well, that's great. We always want to incorporate Black organizational leaders and create a space for them. We do that in the pro-life movement, and we strive to do that in the pro-life movement, right? We want to have as diverse a movement as possible. But that second point, improve the delivery of our health care by addressing and correcting implicit bias. So Planned Parenthood, does this mean you're going to stop opening up abortion facilities in minority neighborhoods? Or does it mean that you're going to continue to open them more often and then claim the reason you're doing it is because you love Black people so much? All right. Let's see another tweet. This is another one I don't even need to address because I've already addressed it. It's so crazy. Here's the last one. If we cannot, this is from Planned Parenthood's acting president, Alexis McGill. If we cannot live our everyday lives with the bodily autonomy to go for a walk, bird watch, live our lives, or protest the violence against our lives without the fear of violence, we can never achieve justice. I love how they use bodily autonomy here, how they don't actually mention what they're actually talking about, which is the right to go into an abortion facility, pay someone a few $100s, and have them suck your baby from your womb or rip your child piece by piece from your womb. That's what they're really talking about when they're talking about bodily autonomy. But it was interesting how they just didn't talk about that. This is crazy. If Planned Parenthood cared so much, truly cared about the bodily autonomy of Black people, of African Americans, why would they be continuing to commit abortions against Black babies? A 2018 report from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte found that abortion accounts for 61% of deaths in the Black community. 61% of deaths. Abortion is a systematic oppression. That's what it is. Abortion is tyranny. Abortion is saying, you're weak, I'm strong, I can do whatever I want, even though, yes, I am responsible for your creation, except in cases of sexual assault. I'm responsible for your creation, but I have other things I want to do. You're an inconvenience to me, therefore I should be able to kill you. That's what abortion says. And Planned Parenthood leads the charge. No other entity commits more abortions in America today than Planned Parenthood. No one kills more African Americans, more Black Americans every single day than Planned Parenthood. That's what they do. And see, this is really the crux of the abortion argument, right? This is the crux of our debate that we have on campuses and online. We know that science tells us that at the moment of conception, unique, whole, living human life has been conceived. So a life that's never existed before and will never exist again. We know that life is living, right? It's growing. The cells are multiplying. We know it's alive. It's not dead. We know that, right? We as pro-lifers believe in science. So that's the argument that we make. We make a consistent argument every time we speak out against abortion, saying No matter the circumstance, no matter what's going on in your life, and maybe it might be really difficult for you to be a mother. No matter what's going on, that life has value, that life has dignity, and there's got to be a way to support your life and your child's life. But what we hear from the abortion movement time and time again is it's nothing, it's a clump of cells. It might be human, but it's certainly not a person. And this is what we hear from Planned Parenthood. And this is really the crux of the argument, because they can get away. This is how they get away with this. They can get away saying all of this stuff about how Black lives matter, how bodily autonomy of Black people matter, and then totally and completely ignore the preborn Black child. That's how they get away with it. That is why, friends, we have to continue our work. That is why we never stop in our work to educate our nation and our world about the injustice of abortion, about what happens and what takes place at the moment of conception, how that child continues to grow, safely tucked inside his or her mother's womb. Now, we can't be involved, and I do want to address this. We cannot be, as a pro-life movement, involved in every social battle or be responsible for defeating every injustice in our society. I saw some tweets this week of, well, if you're really so pro-life, the pro-life movement would be doing this, this, and this. I'm like, well, if you're so pro-Black lives, why aren't you doing this, this, and this, what you just mentioned? The pro-life movement can't defeat every injustice in our society. We are committed first and foremost to defeating the evil that is abortion, because we recognize that until you get this issue right, until you say, no, you're right, a moment conception, unique whole living life has been conceived, and that life has value and has purpose and has meaning and should be protected, until you get that right, it's going to be near impossible to get all of these other important injustices corrected, all of these other human rights injustices corrected. Because how else? I mean, when you talk to someone about the death penalty, right? And then not everyone agrees with me about my position on the death penalty. I'm against the death penalty. But until you get this right, that this innocent child in the womb should not be put to death, it's really hard to make the argument, right, against the death penalty. You have to be consistent. You have to be consistent. We believe every life, even in the case of someone who's sitting on death row, who's been convicted, found guilty, and we know is guilty of a crime, a heinous crime, taking a life, taking multiple lives, raping a woman, raping a child. Even we know, even in that case that someone has done something heinous, something that I probably would never, even as a Christian, I'd have a hard time ever forgiving them for. Not that they can't be forgiven, but that I would have a hard time forgiving them for. Even their life has value and it shouldn't be taken. I would say we shouldn't end their life. The state shouldn't be responsible for ending their life. But until you know that that preborn child who's completely innocent has value, it's going to be really hard to make this other case. And I think that's what we're seeing in our country. We talk about this all the time in the pro-life movement, of a culture of death. We live in a culture of death when so many believe their life doesn't have value. Do you know how many conversations I've had on campuses when I've been trying to make the point to someone, a pro-choice student, why, the preborn child's life matters, and they'll come right out. They will come right out and say, well, my life doesn't matter. I don't care about that person. We have a problem, people, and it's that we don't value ourselves. We don't value our neighbors. And until we get that child, that most defenseless human being, that everyone universally should look at that baby and say, that's a human life that should be protected. Until we can do that, we're going to have a really hard time, maybe even an impossible time, of solving these other injustices that we face in our nation. We face a culture of death, and that is why the pro-life movement is so important, because that's what we do every day, is we battle against a culture of death, making the argument that every life matters. It doesn't matter your level of ability, what your level of ability may be, or how you were conceived, or what your race or ethnic status may be, or how much money you'll make in your lifetime. None of that matters. You have value simply because of who you are and what image you were made of, and whose image, if you're Christian, whose image you were made of. So we have to continue to talk about this. We have to continue our mission. We don't stop our mission ever in the pro-life movement. And we've always been consistent, and we will always be consistent. I think also this speaks, and what we're seeing with Planned Parenthood right now, this speaks to why we need to speak openly about the eugenicist roots of the American abortion industry. Now, I have to make it a point. I don't think it's something you can lead with. Because I think if you're talking with someone who doesn't agree with you at all about abortion, and you start right off talking about Planned Parenthood's a racist institution, something that, Planned Parenthood, we know, enjoys a broad, positive support across the country because they spend tens of millions of dollars a year in PR, money that we don't have. Maybe one day, but we don't have that money. We're certainly not going to be getting from the taxpayers like they do. By the way, we should defund Planned Parenthood, redirect all that money to federally qualified health centers. Have I said that lately? And the Trump administration should be able to do that, and they should just do it through executive order. And we already have told them that, and we need to be pushing President Trump to do that and uphold his promise to defund Planned Parenthood. But they have broad support. And so when you start talking to someone about Planned Parenthood, I don't think it's smart tactically to start talking about Planned Parenthood's racist roots. And I've said this before. I get it. We get it. But I think it's hard for people to understand. I think it's one of those things where you kind of have to walk someone through, and they've got to get with you here, understanding that, at 8 months, 9 months, 7 months, a baby shouldn't be put to death. Then you got to walk them backwards to 5 months and 4 months. Then you walk them to the first trimester. Then you can start talking about hormonal contraceptives that we know can also be abortifacient. Then you start talking about all these other issues. And then they start making sense. It's our model at Students for Life is belong, believe, behave. And that's what we do in person. Online, our model is a little different. But in person, it's belong, believe, behave. Because we realize that most people aren't going to actually listen to what you have to say. They're not going to actually process the things you're saying until they have a relationship with you, until they realize you're not a crazy person, until they realize you care about them and that you want to listen to them. It's the John Maxwell adage in his leadership books of people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Same thing when we're converting and making converts in the pro-life movement. Last night, my friend and my best friend and our executive vice president, Students for Life, Tina Whittington, had a special Facebook Live discussion. And I would encourage you all to go back to Students for Life's Facebook page, watch this discussion. Tina was on. We had two tremendous Black pro-life female leaders, Christina Bennett, the communications director at Connecticut Family Institute of Connecticut, and also Sherilyn Holloway, who's the founder and president of Pro-Black Pro-Life. And their discussion was really about how can pro-life people respond to racism. And there were a lot of topics covered last night, but for me, and this is why I want you to watch it, because there's a lot and it's way longer than I can go in this podcast. But one of the topics they covered last night was, the importance of unity over uniformity. And we talk about this a lot in the pro-life movement. We are a diverse movement, and that is a good thing. That is a strength. We're not all going to agree on tactics and strategies sometimes. We all must agree on the end goal to make abortion illegal and unthinkable. But we don't always agree on the tactics and strategies. Now, should we tear each other down publicly when we don't agree? No, because that's not helpful. And the abortion industry will use that against us to hurt us, right? If they see public disunity. And that's something we work towards in the pro-life movement, even if privately we might disagree with one another's tactics, to express those concerns privately, right? But I really thought that was an important point yesterday of we need unity instead of uniformity. We have to understand that there's going to be different perspectives. There's going to be different beliefs within the pro-life movement, even within Students for Life of America. I don't know if you all have noticed, but I'm a conservative. I'm a politically active conservative. That is not, I would say, the vast majority of Students for Life staffers, or even Students for Life student leaders that we have the honor of serving on campuses. I'm very different from many of our team members, and some of our team members and I disagree vehemently on a whole host of issues. But we agree to fight together on this injustice because we realize, even though we might have a different, point of view when it comes to immigration or school choice or even healthcare delivery, we know this is the greatest injustice our country and our world faces. And I think we have to make space. And I think that one of the things that Planned Parenthood said, we want to make space for Black organizations and Black leaders. We need to absolutely be doing that in the pro-life movement, searching out to really find leaders and help other organizations spring up that reach different audiences than we do, different niches than we do, because we want a diverse coalition. Unlike the abortion industry, which has kind of seeped into the Democratic Party, and now they say, like, if you're going to run for national office as a Democrat, you have to be locked in step with Planned Parenthood. You have to be 100% on board with their agenda. In fact, in New Mexico, a great pro-life Democrat just lost his primary. Students for Life made about 40,000 phone calls, Students for Life Action, into a Democratic primary for two Democrats. I think one pro-life Democrat lost, and the other race is too close to call. Why? Because they're being primaried by the abortion industry, because these two Democrats stopped a horrendous, New York State type of Reproductive Health Act bill from passing in New Mexico, which already is the late-term abortion capital of the world, not only our country. But they were primaried by their own party for just simply being pro-life, even though they have all the other Democratic bona fides. That's what the Democratic Party has done now, that you had to be lockstep. With the pro-life movement, we say, no, we believe there's strength in unity, and we might disagree about different strategies or tactics, or we may even have a different viewpoint when things happen. Some of you all notice I tweeted out several times, Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, All Lives Matters. And some of my very dear pro-life friends were saying, stop saying all lives matters. And there was a huge discussion that's happened of, what does a Black American hear when they see a white American say all lives matter instead of Black Lives Matters? And I do hear that. And so that's why I've been purposely tweeting out just Black Lives Matters, because they need to hear that. Those who aren't white need to hear it from me, a white person, that I believe their life matters. And I believe all lives matter. That's why I'm pro-life, right? But it's important for them to hear and know that you are thinking about the injustice and the racism that they've faced in their life, or the prejudice they've faced in their life. And I think that's important for anyone, for any group of people, to feel like they've been heard and that you care. And so I think we can have different strategies and we can have different tactics sometimes, but we always have to be unified, and we have to make space within our movement for different viewpoints. And while we as a pro-life movement aren't going to have the capacity to fight every injustice, and I've talked about this before, why we are single issue focused in the pro-life movement. And sometimes we'll talk a little about euthanasia and assisted suicide. I often talk about foster care and adoption, if you've watched the last week's episode, because I think these are important issues. But primarily my time, my organizational resources, the money I raise from investors goes to ending abortion. And I know there's these other issues that are interconnected that we have to engage in, we have to start playing in. And some areas, we kind of start working in, but we know we're not going to really be able to work in them until we abolish abortion. Then we're going to have to put more money and more time into them. And I do that because I want to be strategic, realizing that I can't be the expert in 10 issue areas. I can't be the expert in. And if I take organizational time and money and I divide it out by 10, I'm only going to be giving a 10th of my time, a 10th of that money we raise from supporters to ending abortion. And abortion is a big enough issue that deserves its own movement. It deserves its own organizations. And that's okay to say. That's okay to say. But that doesn't mean we don't care as pro-lifers about all these other injustices. That doesn't mean when we go to vote, if there's two pro-lifers, two anti-abortion candidates, we don't then start going, because we vote pro-life first, then we start saying, okay, they're both anti-abortion. Now, where do they stand on this issue, this issue, this issue? And we start looking at those other issues. But I would say we always vote pro-life first. Why? Because if you don't get that the preborn child in the womb, that unique, whole, living human being that's vulnerable, that's completely innocent, if you don't get that child deserves rights and has human dignity, then you've got some deep-seated problems, and I'm not going to be able to trust you on any other issue. So we are a diverse movement, and that is a strength. We're not always going to agree, but that's okay, as long as we listen to each other, as long as we respect each other, as long as we make space for others. Planned Parenthood is trying to use this crisis right now, to position themselves even deeper within the African American community. We, friends, cannot let that happen. We have to continue to call them out, continue to speak out against Planned Parenthood's eugenic racist history, which now they're even acknowledging. They're doing that whole thing that politicians do, right? If there's a little bad, some kind of skeleton in your closet, you kind of let it get out first, because then you can control the narrative and say, oh yeah, I might have done that, but this is why. And then you control the narrative. Then it does become a secret that it gets exposed. That's exactly what Planned Parenthood's doing right now. So we have to continue to push down the gas pedal on this issue, this narrative. Keep driving the fact that if Black Lives Matter, the organization Black Lives Matter, those leaders who lead Black Lives Matter, really care about preventing injustice against Black Americans, they need to care about abortion. They need to care about the fact that every single day, 250 Black lives will be ended inside of a Planned Parenthood abortion facility. And that should never, ever be the case. We as pro-lifers stand for true equality, beginning and ending with that right to life. And we're going to be relentless in our work to abolish abortion, because we know it's an evil that's plagued our nation, it's plagued our world for far too long. And until we get this right, until we create that culture of life that recognizes that child in the womb has innate dignity and value and worth, all of these very important issues that we need to continue to fight on and continue to address, they're going to continue to pop up. They're going to continue to happen because we're not living in a culture of life. So we've got to create that culture of life. So thanks for doing that. Thanks for continuing to speak out, guys. I hope this was helpful. I hope this gave you some talking points that you can use when you're having discussions with friends and family about abortion, about racism, and maybe give you some perspective of if you hear a pro-lifer saying something that you might disagree with, maybe how you should respond, and maybe challenge yourself to respond a little differently than maybe you're thinking in your head. But always know that we as a pro-life movement, we've got to be united, even though we don't have to be uniform. As long as the person standing next to you is united in the goal of making abortion illegal and unthinkable, they're an ally. And we need to get a lot more allies in our movement. Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon. Make sure you guys subscribe, share this episode with friends and family and other pro-life acquaintances on social media. Apparently I have like tons of friends on social media. I don't think I have so many in real life, but that's great. And thanks for sticking with me throughout this podcast, even though I've been recording outside. You might have heard some birds and you got to see my camper. You might have seen my camper move a few times because I can hear my kids inside. So I will see you all next week. Bye.